So you talked about the HbA1c test. For anyone that's unsure about what that actually is, do you want to give us a little bit of a background in terms of what the HbA1c test is?
Yeah, so it's essentially it's become well, in previous years at least, it was the gold standard of your diabetes management, as it's a number that basically it's a biomarker in your blood results that tells you your average 3 monthly blood glucose level. So it's the amount of glucose that is attaching to hemoglobin. So everyone can get an HbA1c, whether you have diabetes type 1, type 2, or if you don't have diabetes. There's a pretty clear range or percentage of glucose that should be attached to hemoglobin. And if you have a lot of glucose circulating in your blood, your HbA1c will come back higher. If you are keeping your blood glucose well under control, it'll be within the normal range. I remember getting this number back, and it was, I think, from memory now, I think it was 6.6%, which if you don't have diabetes, you're right on the cusp there of a diagnosis. Like you shouldn't be above 5.6, right? So I was at least 1% above the normal range. But because my fasting glucose was normal, we were confused at this point. It was like, well, that's why we thought, well, actually, maybe it's because I'm doing so much intense training. And we know that when you do intense training, whether you have diabetes or not, the liver can put glucose into the bloodstream, right, to fuel your exercise. So we were thinking, well, maybe my liver is just overactive and pushing glucose into the bloodstream to fuel the exercise, and that's contributing towards this false elevation of the HbA1c. But it wasn't. What I actually think it was I was just going through these waves of high, like weeks at a time of high blood glucose, and then over a year or 3 months, you get this level that's sort of above the normal range.
And so if people are interested in actually getting that test done, they can just get it through a typical blood test. So going through your GP, which they can also get the fasting blood sugar reading as well.
That's right.
Now there's a different test there, and one that we can probably talk a little bit more, which will actually indicate how well your pancreas kind of reacts in the presence of glucose or carbohydrate being put into the body, which is your oral glucose tolerance test. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that specific test?
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, I've never had to have one because apparently it's not very pleasant. So the oral glucose tolerance test is usually done for people who have insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. You're not going to do this test if you have type 1 diabetes. So you consume a glucose liquid, pure glucose, 75 milligrams, I believe it is, mils of this pure glucose. Apparently it doesn't taste very good. And essentially what you're looking at is over the next 2 hours, what is your blood glucose level doing? How high does it go? Does it come back down into the normal range within 2 hours? And you can also look at your insulin, the amount of insulin your body produces alongside. So you can have these 2 curves. What this is telling you is how robustly your system can work to dispose of glucose. In people who have insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, 2 hours after taking in this oral glucose, their blood glucose does not come back down into the normal range. It can often be well above 10 or 11 millimoles. I don't know what this is for a US audience. There's a bit of a difference there, but it's probably 11 millimoles. I don't know, in milligrams per deciliter. It's high. It's a high number. And what you want to see is an elevation. Of course, it's going to go up. It's normal for your blood glucose to go up, but it really should be coming down fairly quick. So it's okay to have this spike, especially when you're consuming pure glucose as the test is designed. But 2 hours later or 3 hours later, even if you're not back into the normal range, it's indicating that either your pancreas isn't working properly to produce enough insulin to actually bring your blood glucose down, or if it is producing enough insulin, you're resistant to the effects of the insulin. So it's a very good indication of how robustly you can tolerate glucose, essentially.